Hello, 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 hello. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. This is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So, welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be looking at the myth of Judeo-Christian values, right? This is something which is very common amongst right wing conservative circles. There is this idea of the Judeo Christian values as the basis of Western civilization. These are supposedly values, shared values of Judaism and Christianity that are the basis or the bedrock of Western civilization. Today we're going to be taking we're going to be taking a cursory look at this idea of Judeo Christian values. Is there any such thing as Judeo-Christian values? Did they arise from? When did they arise from? And we're also going to be taking a look at a video. We're going to be reacting to a video made by PragerU on this topic, where he listed 10 of these supposed values that are the bedrock or the foundation of Western civilization that he calls the Judeo-Christian values. Now, for these values to make any sense as the basis of Western civilization, certain things have to be true. One, these values have to be exclusive to Christianity and Judaism, which means these values cannot be found in any other religious text, cannot be found in any other religious organization aside or apart from Judaism and Christianity. And number two, even if those values are found in other texts, other religious texts, then there has to be no connection between those religious civilizations and Western civilizations for Western civilization to be influenced at all by any of such values. And number three, such values have to be a basis for law, such values have to be a basis for society, and so many other things that you find in Western civilization today. So let's just take a cursory look at the history of Judeo-Christian, these Judeo-Christian values that is really talked about. Where did it come from? How did it arise? So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll take a look at what. Yep. So there's this article that says, is there really such a thing as Judeo-Christian values, right? And it goes like this. It said, these days, the term Judeo-Christian tradition is most often meant to evoke those religious, ethical, or cultural values or beliefs regarded as being common to both Judaism and Christianity. Obvious enough, perhaps, but then, when asked to specify what these religious, ethical, or cultural values or beliefs really are, we quickly find ourselves struggling. So there's a struggle. People say this, but you ask them, what are these values? And they can't even tell you. Now, even the 10 values that were listed by PragerU, you're going to see just how nonsensical they are. So before asking what the term Judeo-Christian tradition means or what its particular values or beliefs are, we first need to ask what work the term Judeo-Christian is doing in the modern West. It may come as a surprise to many that it has a very short history. In its current dominant meaning, it is virtually unknown before the Second World War. So before the Second World War, there was really no such concept as a Judeo-Christian tradition, right? Only really coming into vogue in the mid-1940s. So relatively recently. If we look at the peaks and troughs of the usage of Judeo-Christian on Google Nungram, which is useful here simply as a heuristic device, we can find that from the 1800s to 1935, the term is virtually non-existent. Then we note two surges in its usage from 1935 to 1951, and then again from 1962 to 2000, with peaks in 1942 and 1992. From 2000, its usage begins to climb again. These two surges reflect two different, albeit compatible, prevailing uses of the term at those times. The first of these was an inclusive use. It originated in the United States as a way of combating the growth of anti Semitism there. But its usage was sharpened in the aftermath of the Jewish Holocaust. This reflected the desire of Protestant America to bring Jews more securely inside the Western tent. As such, it was a gesture of the reconciliation provoked by shame and guilt at the role played by Christianity in the historical persecution of the Jews. So, essentially, this concept arose out of guilt. People would say white guilt today. It arose out of the guilt of Europeans, of Americans, of because of the rabid anti-Semitism that Jewish people had been, going through, even in America, right? And we'll see with the horrors of the Second World War, people were trying to, okay, we have to make it up to these people. We have to graft them into Western civilization. So how do we do that? Well, let us say that Western civilization is based on certain values called Judeo-Christian values. So Jews are now a part of Western civilization. Now, this is a very sneaky thing to do because it sort of makes it look as if there's been this um, friendly rapport between Judaism and Christianity in Europe for all of European history, which is frankly not true. Jews were persecuted in Europe. Jews were persecuted in Christian Europe. They were killed, they were kicked out, they were moved, so many things happened to them. So this sort of revisionist version of what the relationship was between Judaism and Christianity is simply not true. Okay. In this way, Judeo-Christian became a term that transcended both Judaism and Christianity, thereby uniting them. And so President-elect Dwight Eisenhower could say in 1952, our form of government has no sense unless it is founded in a deeply felt religious faith, and I don't care what it is. With us, of course, it is the Judeo-Christian concept, but it must be a religion that all men are created equal, right? Now, the second usage of Judeo-Christian derives in many respects from the first. For just as the same can be used as a way of including and binding people together, it can just as easily be used to exclude those who are deemed not to subscribe to Western values. In the latter part of the 20th century, this was applied particularly to Muslims, despite the fact that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all share a common religious heritage, and that all three religions have Middle Eastern origins. So this term also, is very specific Judeo-Christian values. But as we're going to see later, many of these so-called Judeo-Christian values are values that are shared even with Islam. They are values that are shared with other faiths, other religious groups, right? So this creating of this niche, it's sort of an exclusionary definition. It's such like an exclusionary club. It's a very, very exclusive club. Okay, only Jews and Christians are, they're the ones that are admitted into this club. Now, something else that I need to show from the Wikipedia page shows some of the history of this. Okay, yep. Judeo-Christian. History. Okay, talked about the anti-Semitism, right? So another way in which this Judeo-Christian, so-called Judeo-Christian tradition came about was as a result of trying to combat the atheism of communism, right? So there had to be an idea. If the communists are atheists, then we are religious, and part of that religious tradition is Judeo-Christian, is a Judeo-Christian tradition, right? So that was basically how this concept, which came about in the 19th century, is basically used as a to say, oh, these are Western values. The Western values are founded on Judeo-Christian principles, which is, nah. So we're going to be looking at the PragerU video, and reacting to the PragerU video to see how accurate these values are. So let's go.
Have you ever heard the term Judeo-Christian values? I suspect you have. Can you name any of those values? I suspect you can't, but you should, because Judeo-Christian values are the moral foundation of Western civilization. As the great British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher put it, the truths of the Judeo-Christian tradition are infinitely precious, not only because they are true, but also because they provide the moral impulse which alone can lead to that peace for which we all long.
So I like how he just quoted Thatcher as though she's some sort of authority in religious matters that was supposed to just look at Margaret Thatcher's quote and say, "Oh, yeah, because she said this, this means that the so-called concept or principle of Judeo-Christian values is true." Obviously,
Mrs. Thatcher was a believing Christian. I am a believing Jew. While we have different theologies, we have the same core values. And as far as society is concerned, moral values are far more important than theologies.
now from the Christian worldview, this is not exactly accurate because theology is very, very important in Christianity. There are certain principles, or there are certain teachings, there are certain traditions, there are certain belief systems that are very, very important, that are fundamental, that if you don't believe in such things, it doesn't matter what moral values you espouse. For example, the idea that, oh, Jesus Christ is the Son of God and he was crucified for the sins of humanity, right? That's an essential Christian theology. It doesn't matter what moral values you have. If you don't believe in that in the Christian worldview, then you're nothing. And Jews obviously don't believe in that. So
that is why traditionally religious Protestants, Catholics, Mormons, and Jews are aligned on almost every important moral issue. Here, then, are 10 of those values. Number 1, there is one God. That God is the God introduced to the world by the Hebrew Bible, or as Christians came to refer to it, the Old Testament.
now, do you know who else also believe that there is one God? Wanna guess? Islam. So this value that you're saying is a Judeo-Christian value is not unique to Judaism. It's not unique to Christianity. The idea that there is one God, it's something that is pervasive, even in the Samaritan religion, even in some other religions that are related to the Abrahamic faiths. It's something that you find very pervasive in those religions, right? And if you even want to drill down into Christianity itself, some Christians, like the Catholic, don't strictly believe in a one God. They believe in a Trinity, which I know is a false doctrine anyway, but they do believe in a Trinity in the sense that they say that there are three persons in one God. Technically speaking, that's polytheism, right? Three persons in one God is polytheism, not really monotheism, right? But obviously that doesn't align with this point that's a prayer you just made. It doesn't align in the sense that some Christians actually are sort of polytheistic, which is wrong anyway. There's actually just one God, right? Jesus Christ and his Father, they are not one and the same person. They are two separate beings. They are not equal in any sense, right? That's the correct Christian view. But some Christians, like the Catholics, would dispute that. Then the second part is that it's not something that's unique to Christianity and Judaism. It's very, very fundamental to Islam as well. The idea of one God is something that is shared with Islam as well. So I don't understand how this is exclusive. This idea is exclusive to Judaism and Christianity.
Number 2, The Hebrew Bible introduced the most revolutionary moral idea in history, that there are
And besides, going back to the fact that there is one God, right? Something also essential in the belief in God is the belief in the Christian faith that there is a way to God, there is a true path to God, which is through Jesus Christ, right? There is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Jesus Christ. First Timothy 2, verse 5. Jews don't obviously believe in that. So the relationship with between God and his son Jesus Christ is very essential in Christianity. And Jews don't believe in that. So you just look at this superficial level of agreement and you say, oh, this is something that they have in common. But when you ask a Christian what his belief is God in God is, and you ask a Jew what his belief in God is, you're going to find so many stark differences. But if you're looking at it from a very broad perspective, basically if you even come to African religions, you are going to find the idea of a supreme being, of a supreme deity. Most African religions will tell you that there is one God. All the other gods are just, they are lesser gods that were created by that supreme being. So the idea of monotheism is not unique to Judaism or Christianity.
objective moral truths, just as there are objective mathematical and scientific truths. Without God, there is no moral truth, only moral opinions. Number three.
So while this is from a religious perspective, this is technically true, right? But it's still not exclusive to Christianity or Judaism. This is an idea, this is a principle that is pervasive in almost any religious thought. That truth comes from a religious perspective. There are certain things that are just true from a religious perspective. And these things can vary between the religions itself. So it's not unique. And one can say, okay, although it's not unique for Christian, and for it's not unique to Christianity and Judaism alone. These Christianity and Judaism obviously were the ones that influenced Western civilization, which is not true as well. There was a lot of Islamic influences in the development of Western civilization. At the height of Islamic civilization, there was a lot of progress in science, in mathematics, in physics, in astrology, in chemistry, algebra. There were a lot of, Greek classical works that were preserved in Islamic sources, that were translated into Islamic sources, from which they were now translated later on, taken later on, and built on by the Europeans. So if you want to look at the basis of Western civilization, you cannot discount that. You cannot discount the tremendous contributions of Islam itself, whether in the moral sense, whether in the scientific sense, whether in any sense at all.
Number three, because there are moral truths, good and evil are the same for all people.
So
Number
I
four.
really don't understand what that point means, because there are moral truths, good and evil are the same for all people. So I don't I don't understand how that is a Judeo-Christian value. I don't understand how that is a basis for Western civilization. It seems like he's equating religious views for Western civilization. Does everybody in the West believe in these things? Nope. Does everybody in the West have everybody in the West always believed in these things? Nope. So I how is this a foundation for Western civilization? The realization that there are moral values, these moral values are true for. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
God, not man, not government, not popular opinion, not a democratic vote, is the source of our rights. The American Declaration of Independence declares that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Number five.
So, quoting the American Declaration of Independence, that's not a religious text. That's a secular text, right? And yes, the people said all men are created by or granted by their Creator certain inalienable rights. Were they talking about the Jewish religion? Or were they talking about the Christian religion? Right? I would say they were talking about the Christian religion. So, but how does Judaism feature into that? How is this a value? How is this particular point a value or a shared value in Christianity and Judaism that contributed to the growth, that contributed to the foundation of Western civilization? I mean, Western civilization is not synonymous with American civilization, right?
The human being is created in the image of God. Therefore, every human life is precious, and therefore race is of no significance because God has no race. Number six.
I bet you that if you've looked at enough PragerU videos, you're going to find something very similar to the Charles Murray point of view of, you know, there are certain races who have certain characteristics. IQ differs by race. Certain abilities differ by race, and all that stuff. So if you find something like that, this is going to be a massive contradiction, right? In the sense, in the biblical sense, there was no such thing as race. There was really no such thing in the evolution of the Bible, in the evolution of the Hebrew text and the New Testament and all that. It was basically ethnicities. And even in the Bible, it says that there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female. These are things that are preponderant in Christianity, not so much in Judaism, because Judaism believes that, oh, the Jews are the chosen people of God. So there's still some sort of exclusivity. There's still some sort of we and them, oh, the chosen people and others. But for Christianity, anybody can come in, anybody can become a Christian, um, anybody can be grafted. There is basically no distinction. So that itself, that value itself, is not a shared value. It's not a shared value. It's a quote unquote a Christian value. The idea that um, there is no there are no distinctions between ethnicities, there are no distinctions between males and females, there are no distinctions between slaves and free. That's fundamentally a Christian value.
Number six. The world is based on divine order, and order is made by distinctions. Among these divine distinctions are God and man, God and nature, man and woman, human and animal, good and evil. Number seven.
Again, these are distinctions that you find in almost every society. These are distinctions that you'll find in almost every religion. That is why Christian attitudes and Muslim attitudes towards things like homosexuality, transgenderism are very similar. That is why they are very similar. The Christian will tell you that, oh, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. Those two things are distinct and they are separate. The Muslim will tell you the exact same. If you are looking for moral values, many of these religions essentially share the same moral values, especially the three monotheistic faiths: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. So the idea that Islam should even be removed from this quote unquote Judeo-Christian category is laughable, because everything you are saying here that applies to Christianity and and Judaism also applies to Islam. In Islam, there are strict categorization. In fact, I can tell you that there are even much more categorizations in Islam. And if you even want to look at the religious practices of the Christians, the Jews, and and the Muslims, you might even find some practices in Judaism and in Islam that are much more closer than they are to Christianity. Take, for example, Jews are not allowed to eat certain things, so they have kosher food. Same with Islam, they're not allowed to eat certain food, so they have halal food and they have haram food, so they're not allowed to eat pork. For Christians, we eat everything, right? So that distinction doesn't make any sense.
Man is not basically good. Christians speak of original sin in referring to man's nature. Jews cite what God said in Genesis: the will of man's heart is evil from his youth. Both beliefs are diametrically opposed to the naive modern belief that man is basically good.
So how
And they
how is this this thing he just said, how does it play into Western civilization? The idea that man is not fundamentally good. How I really don't understand how that is a foundation of Western civilization. As he himself is admitting now, there is a modern secularist belief that essentially says that people are good, and these are also in the West. So where do those ideas come from? They are also part of Western civilization. They're also part of Western tradition. So by his own metric, this is a self-defeating point, because not everyone in Western civilization actually believes that man is not good by nature. So he's just espousing religious points of views and stamping them on Western civilization. Oh, this is what Western civilization is. This is what Western civilization believes, which is essentially not true.
They lead to the same conclusion. We need God-based rules to keep us from our natural inclinations.
The funny thing is that even the Bible says that the Gentiles, that they have the law of God written in their heart, that even without a text, a biblical text, that they are able to distinguish between good and evil. They're able to distinguish between right and wrong because they have the law of God written in their heart. So when you're saying you need some sort of rules-based organization, some sort of rules-based foundation for people to be able to keep away from their natural inclinations, that's certainly not true, because there is basically no religion that will tell you that stealing is good. Nope. There's no religion that will tell you that murder is good. Nope. There's no religion that will tell you that raping people is good. Nope. There's no religion that will tell you that any of these so-called vices and any of these so-called moral vices that you're looking at is good. None. None whatsoever.
Number 8. Therefore, our natural inclinations are a very poor moral guide. As
I don't understand how is this? Oh, good Lord.
religious Jews and Christians put it, don't follow your heart. A lot of terrible things have been done and are being done now.
Same thing with Islam. In fact, Islam literally means submission to God, which means don't follow your natural inclinations, don't follow your heart, follow God. Now, what it means to follow God may be entirely different for the Muslim and for the Christian and the Jew, but that principle, that basic principle is there: submission to God, to the will of God. So, how is this something that is exclusive to Jews and Christians, knowing full well that Western civilization did not develop in isolation? It was in close proximity to Islamic traditions and Islamic civilization, and to other civilizations like civilizations from the East. The world was not isolated. This thing called Western civilization did not spring out of nowhere in isolation. No, it took in influences from so many parts. So this idea of, oh, it's based on some Judeo-Christian blah, blah.
By people thinking their hearts are better guides than Judeo-Christian values. Number 9. Human beings have free will and are therefore responsible for how they behave. In the secular world, free will does not exist
So
because all human behavior is the result of biology and environment.
so I don't
And if
understand.
there
So this is why I said this PragerU people, they're so myopic, they're so cringe, they're so yucky. Is he saying that secularism is not a part of Western civilization? That people who don't believe in free will, they're not a part of Western civilization, or that such thoughts are not found in Western civilization? If you go far enough, you would see these discussions by Aristotle and the other Greek philosophers, Roman philosophers about these things, and they are a part of Western civilization. So again, PragerU is just taking religious values and equating them for Western values, which is certainly not true.
If there is no free will, people are not responsible for what they do, good or bad. Number 10, the 10 Commandments. They are the core of Judeo-Christian values. In fact, if everyone lived just by the 10 Commandments, we wouldn't need armies or even police.
Well, the Ten Commandments is not the core of Judeo-Christian values. For the Jews, there are many, many more commandments. There are many, many, many more, not just 10 commandments. So that is just factually wrong. For Christians, there are actually two commandments really that are fundamental or essential. And the first commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all thy might. And the second one is to love thy neighbor as thyself. And the Bible says that upon these two rests all the other laws and all the other traditions and every other thing that is taught. So essentially, it's two commandments for Christians and more than 10 commandments, up to 26 for Jews. So this is so factually inaccurate. And if you look at these commandments themselves, you will find similar things in Islam. For example, the commandments of thou shalt not bow down to idols. You will find it in Islam. There is none of these commandments that you're talking about that you're not going to find in other religions as well.
There's another important aspect to the term Judeo-Christian. The two religions need each other. Without the Old Testament, there is no New Testament. Virtually every Christian moral principle derives from the Hebrew Bible. Not only the 10 Judeo-Christian values I just enumerated, but such basic moral principles as love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord your God, and love the stranger. At the same time, Jews need Christians. It was overwhelmingly Christians who carried knowledge of the Hebrew Bible to the world. Judeo-Christian refers to...
This is just factually inaccurate and wrong. First of all, you're saying the Hebrew Bible, Christians need the Jews because without the Old Testament, the New Testament doesn't exist. Yeah, because it's a continuation of the same text and all that, right? But how do Jews need the Christians in that sense? It wasn't Christianity that spread the Hebrew Bible. No, it wasn't Christian. That was the Christian Bible, yes, and some of it were from Jewish tradition, right? The Jews had their own texts. They had the Talmud and all that. And those things were spread by Jews themselves because guess what? The Jews were not just sitting in Jerusalem. They were in every part of the world. They were in every part of the Islamic world, every part of the Christian world, every part of Europe. And they are regarded as one of the greatest religious teachers of all time. So essentially, they spread the Hebrew Bible, the part of it that is Judaism. They spread it everywhere they went. It wasn't Christianity that spread it for them. No, it wasn't.
to one other fact. No religions in the world share a common revelation the way Judaism and Christianity do.
Patently false again, Islam.
That common revelation is the Hebrew Bible. The only
If you look at the Islamic texts, you would see that many of those things that you find in the Hebrew Bible are also in the Islamic texts. Many of the prophets are similar, many of the stories are similar. Same thing, same thing with the Christian Bible. Many of the prophets, many of the stories and everything, you can find bits and pieces, not just bits and pieces, you can find a lot of things from the Hebrew Bible and a lot of things from the New Testament, a lot of things from the Old Testament and New Testament. You can find it in the Quran. So, not unique.
The only two religions that share that Bible or any sacred work are Judaism and Christianity.
Patently false.
The ultimate embodiment of Judeo-Christian values has been the United States of America.
Oh, crap.
America's founders were Christians, some culturally, some theologically, who were rooted in the Old Testament. So much so that Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin designed a seal for the United States that depicted God leading Israel out of Egypt, just as they believed God was leading America out of Europe. Only if we keep these values will we keep America, and for that matter, Western civilization.
Good Lord. So much of prayer, you cringe. So this is the problem. This is the so Stanley is saying is prayer of Jewish heritage. Yeah, he says to be. He says to be is Jewish heritage, shared core values, those values which have shown to be shared by Islam as well, right? Racism waiting for the core value, for that core value built upon equals to foundational. What do you mean by that? Humility isn't a PragerU core value. Of course, it's not its core value. My parents are my creators. White Jesus and Santa Claus. One of these is God, right? No, Greek culture is adopted by Western culture. Yeah, Greek culture is adopted by Western culture, right? Greek culture is a part of Western culture, right? So what PragerU is just essentially doing is making a is just saying religious values are Western values, which is not true. Secularism is literally a rejection of a religious worldview, which is true. And secularism is also a part of Western culture, right? You said no, Christians spread both, Charles, Old Testament and New Testament. Yeah, the Christians spread the Old Testament and the New Testament, but there wasn't a distinction that, oh, this was a Jewish text and this was a Christian text. Both were seen as Christian texts because it was seen as one continuous revelation. It wasn't seen as, oh, this is the book for the Jews and this is the book for the Christians. No, the Old and the New Testament were Christian books, and if you read the Talmud and whatever, you are still going to find differences between the Christian Old Testament and what the Jews believes as well. So Jefferson wasn't a Christian per se, he was a deist. Yep. Franklin wasn't much of a Christian per se. True. Stanley says, I know I'm going to pop you off here on this point. Yeah, I don't contend those points. I don't contend those points. I don't see how, you know, Stanley said Jesus was a Jew who became a Christian after he was killed. Yes, he was a Jew. He was a Jew, and the Christian religion was essentially founded on his death and resurrection, right? So he was, according to the Christian view, the Christian religion is like a fulfill. Jesus Christ, his death was a fulfillment of of the old Jewish law. So everything in the Jewish side ceased or became fulfilled, right? So that's why Christians don't have to keep the Sabbath law and so many other laws that the Jews practice, because they are now obsolete from the Christian perspective. Those laws, no, they're no longer binding on Christians. They are no longer binding on people who are believers, right? But the Jews obviously don't think so. So theirs is different, right? Um, yep. So essentially, like I said, what PragerU is doing is conflating religious values for Western values. And I don't think those two things are similar. I don't think I was expecting to find something much more substantial, something deeper to show that, okay, these things are fundamental, right? Stanley said, so Judaism is wrong on Messianism. As a Christian, yeah, they're wrong. They are still expecting their Messiah. We know the Messiah has come already, and but they're still expecting their Messiah. So obviously they're wrong, right? So what PragerU did was to just carry religious values and just superimpose them on Western values and say, these are one and the same thing. This is the basis for Western civilization. There were so many other things that was the basis for Western civilization. And Stanley mentioned something about, slavery, right? Was that also something that was drawn from the Jewish and biblical traditions? I know there was slavery in the Bible and all that, but the Bible wasn't specifically saying be slaves. There were other aspects of Western civilization as well, such as imperialism. The Bible didn't say, oh, go conquer other nations. Yeah, the Bible did say, spread the word of God, but not at the point of a gun or the point of a sword, right? So that one too. So so many things that are a component of Western civilization. And to say that, the basis of Western civilization is Judeo-Christian, it's just is just totally false. It doesn't bear with reality. It doesn't bear with the facts. It doesn't bear with truth. It doesn't bear with the understanding of history. It's a revisionist version of history. It's trying to show a repertoire between, Christianity and Judaism, which never existed. It's trying to show that there's always been this mutual cooperation, these mutual shared values between Christians and Jews. Certainly not. The Christians were not allowed to practice what you call usury. That's why many of the Jews went into finance, because they could take charges, they could take percentages and all that. Christians were not allowed to do that. So that's an essential dynamic of Western civilization as well, and is also an essential component of anti-Semitism spreading, because anti-Semitism was part of it was from the fact that the Jews were good in finance. They were basically forced into doing that because Christians wouldn't do that. And then the idea of the greedy Jew came about. So you can't ignore all those dynamics and just say, the Judaism and Christianity had always. In fact, there's a quote that says Judaism is Judaism because it rejected Christianity, and Christianity is Christianity because it rejected Judaism. And that is true. Fundamentally, both religions are different. You can't be a Christian and believe in Judaism. It's not, and you can't be a religious Jew and believe in Christianity. It's technically not. It's not possible. It's not possible. Both are contradictory. Christians claim that they are now the spiritual Jews. They are now the inheritors of the blessings of Abraham. The Jews still feel they are the chosen people of God. So those two things they're in competition with one another. It can't be both. It has to be one, right? Yeah, the Christians are right. Anyway, so that's just what I wanted to talk about. It's not an open stream. It's just me ranting for 45 minutes and giving my thoughts on these things, right? So I think this would be a good place to call the stream to a close. Like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you in another live stream. It's bye for now.